Why not?
Man, what happened? Should we sing to you?
If you want to sing, that'd be great.
Oh, let's sing then. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Brett. Happy birthday to you. Yes, and many more. Okay, now we're gonna hop on board here with the listening spaces. Sister, where is yours? Where do you listen to God?
I listen to the song you sang.
Uh-huh.
You are my place.
Mm.
She has a beautiful voice.
Yes, she does.
I recorded that. I played it to Rob. That's really it works. And I always listen to that song whenever I'm troubled in the living room, in the recliner, with the lights out.
Awesome.
From Alexa, say Alexa.
Yeah, sure.
Let's listen.
Wow. So Cam, in her living room, in the recliner, with the lights out, you are my hiding place. That's where she hears God.
In lunch hour with my friends.
Okay.
I listen to that and talk about that song.
Talk about it. Wow. Anybody else? Where do you hear God's voice? Caleb.
Mine are almost two opposite. I hear him when I'm by myself in my room, but then also when I'm around other Christians praising him. So my focus is on him.
There we go. There we go. So two opposites, and that's true. We hear in different ways, in different places. So in the silence and with other believers praising him. Yeah. Well, there is a great. Our scripture today is gonna. It blew me away. It's a little detailed, but I loved it. And so we're going to look at our scripture. Our scripture is going to be 1 Kings. And you can look at that on your phone or up here. 19 verses 11 to 13. Would somebody like to read that scripture for us this morning?
The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave.
Thank you, Christy. Now, this scripture takes us back about 800 years before the birth of Jesus. So go back there. And Elijah was a prophet, and he was in a lot of difficulty. Elijah always seemed to get into trouble. Can anybody relate to that? Darlene, I was looking at your table back there. I thought they would all look up and say, amen. They're not going to acknowledge that, are they? And Elijah was in trouble with the king. It was King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. And you know that name, Jezebel, is exactly what it is, Jezebel. Well, when Ahab and Jezebel got married, Jezebel brought with her religion, and it was a pagan worship. That's just what it was. It was pagan worship. But she brought that along with her, so the king was not about to say no. The king just welcomed that right on. And so it started this problem because not only was it her religion, but she made sure that all the people of Israel followed the pagan worship. So there's this part that God raised up Elijah to preach against pagan worship. Put yourself in Elijah's place. God speaks to his heart. I want to raise you up and speak against Queen Jezebel. And he went through like 14 boxes of Q-tips. Trying to make sure that his ears were like, clean. Surely not. Surely God was not speaking that to him, to stand up against the queen. Well, that's what God said. And so one day Elijah had a showdown with 450 Baal prophets. Remember that in the Old Testament, that story. And they challenged to see if God would speak. They called God down, and Elijah's God came down, and the ones who worshiped Baal did not, and they were destroyed. And on hearing this, Jezebel got ticked off because she was embarrassed. Okay, now go with it. What do you do when you get embarrassed? You get ticked off. Yeah. So Jezebel's ticked off. She's embarrassed. What's she going to do? And so she says this, I'm going to kill him. Now, she didn't just mean that as a fly-by-night little phrase. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to put a price on his head. He's going to be gone in 24 hours. Well, Elijah heard it. And so Elijah takes off running, and he flees to a place called Beersheba. He's in the wilderness. He's fighting for his life because he's afraid he's going to be killed. And at this point, Scripture tells us Elijah was ready to give up. He thought he heard, surely that wasn't God. God was going to do things this way. Somebody help me with that thought, because we do it every single time. God spoke to me. I know how this is going to turn out, because God spoke, and I'm going to rule it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to guide it. That's what we think. And so here's Elijah. God spoke to me. I stood up, and now Jezebel, the queen, is going to have me killed. This cannot, I must not have heard him right. We've been there. When we swear this is what God told us, but it doesn't turn out that way. It doesn't look like we think it's going to look. So Elijah wants to give up, and he's afraid for his life, and he finally gets to a place, and he sits under a tree, and I love this because this is what I picture him doing. He sits under the tree, and he thinks of all that happened, and he says, take me now, God, take me now. Just take me now. I'm done. I'm over all of this. Take me now. Y'all sit here. Y'all have said that before. I can't handle this anymore.
I'd rather be dead.
Yes, I'd rather be dead than to live through this. We have said it. Elijah was right there. Take me now, take me now. And here's Elijah. He's a wonderful prophet. He has very effective ministry, but he's ready to give up. Anybody else today ready to give up? Do you know what it's like? There have been times, I think if we're all honest, there have been times that we all have just said, it's not worth it. It's not worth this. It's not worth this. But here comes the good news. Elijah did not give up. God spoke to Elijah, gave him what he needed to continue on. And so this is the point that we get from all of this. To hear God's voice, we must get away from things that distract us. Because here's Elijah, and he's worried about the prophets of Baal. He's worried about Jezebel. All of these things are going through his mind. He cannot hear God. What this scripture tells us that we must get out of the distractions. It says in verse 8, so he arose and he ate and he drank, important, and he went in the strength that that food gave him for 40 days and 40 nights. And he went to the mountain of God, it was called Mount Sinai. And there he went into a cave, and he spent the night there, and behold, the Lord came and said, "What's up, Elijah?"
Which verse is that?
That's,
That's all right. Only good.
I think that was the New King James.
Colleen version.
So here we have this picture of Elijah. He's sitting there, and he had food, and he is rested, and he has strength, and he is at Mount Sinai, and he's remembering that's where Moses brought down the 10 Commandments. I mean, that place, and he goes there, and he meets God, and he can do that because there are no distractions. None. That's why he can do that. So he went to a place where he was alone with God, and that's where he met him. Again, I'll ask you to keep looking at that question. Where is your Mount Sinai? Where is your listening space? It is important that we know that place, because this is the next point that we want to get from the scripture. God is still speaking. He's still speaking to his kids. And so it's important for us to be still enough to hear his voice. John 10:27. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me.
All right. Come on.
I never heard God in an audible voice. The one kid on the video, he's like, God must sound like this. Ooh. And it was almost a slant on Santa, I think. But I've never heard that audible voice. But I will tell you, every day, God speaks to us. He speaks to us in Scripture. He speaks to us through other believers. He speaks to us in a song, in a book. Absolutely. So, there's still another way. He will speak to us in the silence. So the Lord said to Elijah in verse 11, we read it, go out, stand on the mountain. He didn't hear his voice in the wind. He didn't hear it in the earthquake. He didn't hear it in the fire. But Elijah heard the Lord, a still small voice. I love that. A still small voice. That's how he usually speaks to me. In that still small voice, or that song that goes deep, or that reading that's like, wow, that's how he speaks. That's how he speaks. If you all are saying, I don't get that, I don't hear that voice, I'm not sure what you're talking about, let me suggest this, and I don't mean to be critical at all, but let me suggest this. There might be a good reason that you're not hearing God's voice, and that many times I don't, because by the way, I don't do this well. We live in a noisy, hurried world. We do. We get home, and to rest, we decide we're going to rest by turning on the television. And then we hear something that we don't agree with, and it gets us all riled up. TV is a hard thing, but I will tell you this. I'll show you another thing that's difficult. Did you bring your phone? We're connected to this.
Yep.
All the time.
We are connected to our cell phone. We are. Was that my cell phone? Did my cell phone just go off? Was that mine? It's not mine. It's not mine. That's not my ringtone. said. I mean, my text, the only other person that texts worse than me is Barb Snodgrass. Hers will go on and on like this long. Mine are only about this. I go on and on. It is hard for me to say a simple yes or no. Pat, even if you text me and say, can I do this at this time? I don't want to say yes. I just want to say, oh, what a wonderful thought. I didn't think about that. That sounds great, Pat. Now, on and on, she doesn't want to hear that. So text. But it's not just text. It's emails. Come on, our emails come right to our phone. My email sounds like this. My text sounds like this. Well, I hate to even say it. It's a bottle cap, like. And so then I know the difference between a text and an email. Facebook. Holy moly. Our phone connected to Facebook. When someone tags me, it shows up. Someone has said something, it shows up. So we don't want to miss a single thing. We are connected to our phones. If we're connected to our phones, why don't we respond to God? Thank you. God do the same way. Was that God? Did God just speak to me? Was that God speaking to me? We're concerned about we're connected with our phones. Surely not. Surely not. For God to speak, I believe we need to find some silence to get that going, if you will. Because that's what Elijah heard from God. How many are uncomfortable with silence? Really? Yeah. We're uncomfortable. We have to have something going on. If we want to hear the voice of God, we need to be still to experience the people, to experience the song, to experience the writing, to experience his voice. Suggestion, find a place every day to be still. Find a place every day to read a little bit and be still, to hear that song, to be with those people. Why is that important? Y'all, God has things for us to do. God has things for us to do. We must hear what he wants us to do. 1 Kings 19, starting with verse 15. Then the Lord said, go, return on your way. So the Lord's speaking to Elijah. Go and return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you get there, anoint Hazael to be king. Anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. Anoint the son of Nimshi to be king over Israel. What is so amazing, Elijah needed to go away and be still and hear God and be refreshed so he could come back and do what God had called him to do.
Right.
That's why Teresa and Donna are on vacation all the time. No, I'm sorry. Erase it. There are times when we need to get away, to be still, to hear the voice of God. God says to Elijah, I have work for you to do. Let's get back to work. And then Elijah is encouraged because he knows God is not finished with him yet.
All right. Come on now.
That he'll strengthen him for that work. Do you have that sense of purpose, God's purpose in your life? You might not be where you are wanting to be quite yet, but oh, you will.
Amen.
That was a word to you.
Thank you.
That's just the way it is.
Receive it.
If we will be still and hear God's voice, he will guide and direct. Do you have a sense of God's purpose in your life? So this is the best part. I have saved the best part to last. So what happened to Elijah? Elijah goes back. I'll bet you he's a little fearful. Yeah. Come on, he's going back to Jezebel? I'm sure he's a little fearful. He went back. Jezebel did not kill him. much bigger in our lives than in reality. Jezebel didn't kill him. He continued to confront Ahab and Jezebel. He anointed other kings, just like I read. But guess what? This is the best. Scripture tells us that he began to mentor a young man by the name of Elisha. So he hooked up with Elisha. He's like encouraging him, saying, you can do this. I know. I had to steal away. Let me tell you, find your cave. Find your listening space. Because I had to. So he became Elisha's mentor. And God began to do amazing things with their relationship. Oh my gosh. They would talk about the Lord. They would encourage each other. And Elijah would encourage Elisha and say, come on, look at what God has for you. And then came the day. On Elijah's last day, 2 Kings 2:11 said, then it happened, as they continued on their journey, talking to each other and encouraging each other, suddenly, boom, a chariot of fire. And y'all, that's just not everyday occurrence. Suddenly, a chariot of fire appeared with horses of fire. And it was like that chariot came down like this and just separated the two of them. It says in Scripture. It just separated the two of them. Elijah on one hand, Elisha on the other. And it says, Scripture says, Elijah went up by a whirlwind. So this is what I picture. You know those little dust whirl things that happen and we see them? That's what I picture it starting like this little dust. And then Elijah's like, woo. And then Elijah just hopped into the chariot and off they went. Okay, that's just my version of it. It might have been more dramatic than that or less. Or it might have been a story just to teach. I don't know, but it's good for me. And on Elijah goes. And as he goes, I think, had I been there, I would have said to him, just think what you would have missed. Just think what you would have missed if you had gone away to hear the still small voice. Elijah would have missed all of that had he not gone away to be still. Listen. I pray that we will let God speak to us in the midst of silence. That we will hear his call upon our life and he will say to you, don't give up with this situation because I'm not finished with you yet. Yeah. May we continue to do the work of God because we have been in a still place and we have heard his voice. So, I pray that we will listen for that still small voice every day and that we will discover our listening places. Those spaces that we have, that place that we go to where we will hear his voice because church, we have a lot of work to do. Everyone with different gifts. God speaks to us differently. If we don't hear him, we will not do, we will not know. What do you think? Listening spaces, what do you think? It's your turn now. Y'all listen as much as you should? I don't. I'm terrible at this. I'm terrible at this.
I listened to a podcast this morning that said we're God's plan A. And if we're plan A and we don't hear and don't know what to do, how are we going to do what he wants us to do?
Absolutely. Absolutely. How are we going to hear How are we gonna hear? We need to be still to listen. Our kids, I mean, let's just look at our kids. I say kids because they're younger than me. Let's talk about our kids. We need to encourage our kids. They have some big choices. What are you gonna do when you graduate? Graduation's right around the corner. It won't be long. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Graduation's in May. What are you gonna do? Where are you gonna go? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? How are you gonna know? God will speak it if we listen. If we listen. You know, give that to him because he has this plan and it is plan A. It's plan A. Let's listen for the plan A because if we don't listen for the plan A, what will we settle for? You know, plan B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P.
But let's have that out there.
Yes, yes.
Last night, there was a meeting I should have gone to, and I was really afraid to go. I was afraid it would become violent. And, so, you know, I don't drive on the right, and I don't drive after dark, and so I was easy to excuse myself from going there. So just as I had firmly decided I was not going to get up and get ready to do that, Sharon called, and I said, I'll be there in an hour. And I tell you, I have never driven through such rain as I drove through coming home now. But, you know,
But
I
that-
plan B. If you're not going to do this,
Yeah.
go get busy with this other
Right,
thing.
but look at what you did for Sharon, because more than likely, that was your plan A.
It probably
Yeah,
was.
that was your plan A.
It probably was.
Absolutely.
That was the second part of the podcast. There is no plan B.
There is no plan B. God has plan A. There is no plan B. Somebody else. What'd you think? That's our challenge, to listen.
I think we also get terrified in the fact that if we don't do the right thing at that right exact moment, then it's hopeless, and it's not, because you can be constantly led to that path. So even if you happen to you didn't make the right decision, or you didn't happen to hear, it's not over.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And you become so fearful that you want that you don't. Eva, I want to pick on you. Because you started off at school and you were going to be a what?
Oh, what is it, PA?
PA. Okay, stop right there. So she's feeling PA. Then what happened?
I couldn't get past organic chemistry.
She couldn't get past organic chemistry.
Oh,
Yeah, you got people here that are like, Then what happened?
And then I talked to my mom about it, and she brought the idea about mortuary science.
Mortuary science.
Yeah, so then I was like, okay, let me check this out. So we took care of my mom, went to a funeral home to check that out, and so that's probably the path I'm gonna go down.
That's probably the path that she's going to go. That's not how it started out. Caleb, you have a different story because you pretty much knew what you wanted to do. And so Caleb was focused on that. He wanted to go to Ohio State. He did. He graduated there. Now he's at Ohio University. He has his first master's and he's finishing up his second because he knows what he wants to do. He knows what he wants to do. It doesn't always look like that. If you go look at my high school yearbook, don't. But I'm just saying, if you would see that I said I was going to be a social worker. And that's exactly what I did. I went to school for it. I became a social worker. That's what I did. It's not that easy, though. Many people will start out this way, and because of the situation, will end up this way, and maybe end up this way, and then maybe end up over here. And then it's like, yes, now I've landed. Don't give up.
It's like when your father starts out doing exactly what he wanted to do and ends up doing what he wanted to do. And the kids think, well, it's just is that easy?
Right, and it's not, and it's not. So we listen for that voice. We listen for that voice. Because in Elijah's situation, had he been able to say, I'm almost done really. Had he been able to say back there when God spoke to him, stand against this pagan worship? He goes, I heard not, I'm going to stand against it. Wouldn't that have been a story? Then he started questioning and doubting and going a different way, but because he was willing to listen to that voice, even though it was down the road, he didn't miss going up in a blaze of glory. Yeah, Darlene.
Now can that voice be another voice? God speaking through someone else.